Welcome to another episode of The Edge, presented by the Bluntness. Here we take you behind the scenes with amazing people who are pushing the boundaries in cannabis today. I'm your host, Gregory Frye, Executive Editor at the Bluntness, and today I have an awesome guest, Edmund DeVeaux, President of the New Jersey CannaBusiness Association, which you can learn more about or even apply for membership at NewJerseyCannaBusiness.com. Ed, thank you so much for joining the show. How are you? How are things in New Jersey?
Gregory, all is well. We have a beautiful spring day today. The sun is shining. We'll get to about 70 degrees today. So look, all is well. Any day you wake up is a good day.
You know, that reminds me of something I heard yesterday. Christine De La Rosa of the People's Dispensary mentioned this, that one of the issues with all the other social equity programs that we've seen prior that have fallen short has been that they weren't designed by people of color, that there was no diversity within their design, which is why they failed. And I think that's the next thing I really wanted to ask you about, is that social equity focus. And I wonder, I know the regulations are currently underway, but I wonder what your pulse of your reading on the pulse of the situation is in New Jersey, and if they, I guess it's sort of tying into a second question, in addition to social equity regulations, is if New Jersey took any inspiration from New York's recent passing of MRTA.
You know, that's an interesting concept, that the problems with regulation, because it lacked, I guess, investment by people of color. I think it was going to, regardless, I think it would have come with some challenges. You absolutely get your best ideas when it comes from a diverse group. In New Jersey, we were fortunate in that our legislators, when creating the legalization bills, did in fact listen to the Black caucus of our legislature. They did in fact listen to our social justice advocates. They listened to people like myself, policy makers, policy advisors of color. And so what we ended up with was a beginning. I think you can always do more. And I think that will always be a criticism of policy, that you can always do more. And so I think with a spin of optimism, I think what we started off with in terms of creating micro licenses in our legislation, where it's a lower bar to entry into the industry, between micro license, expungement, having expungement of records, especially for simple possession charges. Things like that got into the bill, and that's a great start. Now the focus is, and I'll talk more about it later if you like, is, how do we make sure that it's not just people who are touching the plant, but it's starting up businesses and making sure that the ancillary businesses that are owned by minorities, women, veterans, make sure that we stay in the mix, and that there's this healthy mix of policy going forward. So I hear the criticisms. Clearly, can you do more? The answer is yes, but you've got to start somewhere. And I think that New Jersey did very well as a start. And so now it's up to us to make sure that we keep some momentum, that we make sure that minorities, women, veterans don't get left behind as we move forward.
Well put. And I would like to dive further into that with you in regards to ancillary businesses. I think there's a lot of overlooked opportunity there. Most people don't quite realize how deep the ancillary needs are for cannabis, just as any other industry. And could you talk a little bit about where your head is there, is at there in terms of the ancillary side of things?
Sure. In fact, we just announced last week, and we're very proud of these conversations. We actually formed a strategic alliance with 6 social and economic justice groups in the state of New Jersey. And we formed and we announced this alliance because what we want to make sure is that whether they're contractors or subcontractors or license holders or potential license holders, that again, people of color don't get left out. So we formed a strategic alliance that includes organizations like the NAACP, the statewide Hispanic Chamber. We all came together and formed this alliance, and we are going to keep the conversations about Black businesses, minority businesses, women-owned businesses at the forefront of the legalization effort. Not legalization, but the standing up of the legalized industry. It's absolutely paramount that when you look at the economic fabric of any state, of any country, when you leave populations out, that hurts the general economy. That hurts your general economic base. So why would you forego creating opportunities? Now, that being said, what we are all about at the association is making sure that through our membership and keeping people informed that that ancillary businesses get a shot at making money. You know, it was recently reported that the cannabis industry actually created $92 billion for the United States just in last year. And this is not just growing or touching the plant. This is $92 billion because we had janitorial businesses, we had transportation or delivery services, we had construction, we had all of those ancillary businesses where $1 makes $2. Dollars stay within communities. Look, it's a multiplier. And so what we really do try to do at the association and beyond is have the conversations. Not everyone is going to get a license to touch the plant, and that's okay, but you could still be very much a part of the industry. And so we do what we can, either through our strategic alliance with the NAACP, the statewide Hispanic Chamber, the Essex County Latino Chamber, the Camden Business Association. The city of Camden, New Jersey is 96% people of color. So look, this is all about making sure that everyone has a shot, whether you own a license or you can support a license, there's opportunity.
What are your thoughts on, talking about creating opportunities for people who want to participate? What are your thoughts on this emerging dynamic of the legacy market, previously known as the informal market or the black market, the legacy market collaborating with the legal market, the corporate operators? What are your thoughts on these two sides coming together and working together as opposed to one trying to shut the other out?
You know, that's an interesting question, Gregory. Here in New Jersey, we in fact have people that have a celebrity status as it pertains to the legacy market, and so people do not hesitate by saying, "Hey, and these individuals should automatically get a license, right? It should be a licensing category all to itself." I'm not opposed to that. I'm not going to sit here and say don't give somebody who's a legacy provider a license. In fact, if you think about it, if you were to create policy around it, I would start off with, okay, are you willing to be inspected for mold, for mites? Are you willing to adopt practices that are more conventional than what you've already done? And if someone is willing to open their doors And unfortunately, I guess you have to say, open their books. It's possible, it's likely that you could, in fact, have a licensing category for those who have participated in the cannabis industry before it was legal. So yeah, it's definitely a conversation. I think that, again, because we do have people that bring or have brought some celebrity to it, it definitely raises the question. And again, as an association, why would we say no? Look, in the alcohol industry, bootleggers, we now call them micro brewers
Right.
or micro distillers, right? But they were bootleggers. So there's definitely room. I think it can be done. We're not opposed to it. I just think that from a public health, public safety, regulatory standpoint, look, the door can in fact be opened.
And I think there's so much to be said about that. The two sides collaborating. If they fight each other, Andrew D'Angelo made a good point about this in Forbes the other day. If they fight each other, it's not going to be pretty, and we're going to be in for Prohibition 2.0, which nobody wants, and except for the prohibitionists. And like your point about the alcohol, the microbrews they're not taking anything away from the Bud Lights out there, but I don't think Bud Light or Coors or whatever, I don't think they're worried about losing. They're probably more worried about losing to cannabis than they are to microbrews, local microbrews on the corner or whatever. I think it also ties in, Ed, to something that you've elaborated on before, and you touched upon earlier with the micro licenses, is this free market system in cannabis where we tear down the artificial walls, which I think are mostly resurrected out of fear. Maybe you could correct me on that if you've got a better sense, but what are your thoughts on that exactly?
Well, first, Gregory, I think let's make it clear, and this is something that I often have to remind people of. Look, the illicit market does not go away. It doesn't disappear just because you've legalized the plant. It remains. I mean, that's part of the nature of industry. You Whether it's tires or suitcases or regardless, you will always have people that will have products that fall off the back of the truck, as we say here. Right? You will always have an opportunity to purchase products, services through channels that are not necessarily regulated, and so it doesn't go away. The whole point of legalization, Gregory, was to get to your question, is to do away with the fact that the plant should have never been criminalized to begin with. It was criminalized out of fear back almost 90 years ago. Almost 90 years ago. It was criminalized because there was an attempt to marginalize people of color. It was criminalized to marginalize people that were of the music culture. So look, the plant should have never been criminalized to begin with. It was criminalized out of fear. Go fast forward to the late 60s, early 70s, it was weaponized to purposely do harm to people. And when I say that, so you went from criminalization, where yes, you could be arrested for possession, for use, but then it was weaponized because of the anti-war movement. All of a sudden, cannabis became a Schedule I drug. It was put on the same plateau as heroin. That was absolutely nonsense, and it was done with the deliberate notion that you were going to ruin people's lives. So the aspect of fear has driven this industry, has driven our country for a century, almost a century, when it comes to cannabis. So yes, this fear factor, we've got to tear it down. We've got to do away with it. The fact that you still have communities that are debating whether or not to have cannabis in their borders is ridiculous. It's legal. The adult use market is going to be stood up with regulation, with regulatory oversight, and we support that. It needs to be done, and we definitely need to tear down these walls or the fear factors that have marginalized people, that have harmed people over decades.
Well put. Right. Most people don't know. You mentioned the early 70s, Schedule 1. Most people don't know that Nixon threw out 4,000 pages of science proposing that he decriminalize cannabis. He totally buried it. I think it's one of the most greatest conspiracies in U.S. history. And people forgot that history, which is why it's been repeating itself for so long. We've really covered a lot of ground here rather quickly, and I wonder, Ed, if there are any other important challenges that are at the center of all this right now that are on your radar that you'd like to share with others that we should be aware of?
Well, it's funny, and I appreciate that, Gregory. The fact is, I have in fact worked in other states on this issue, so I do have more than just a Jersey view of things, and so here's what I consider the one of the biggest challenges. No matter what you do, it will always be challenged, right? Look, public policy is not perfect. It's going to have circumstances where people will question what you do. You're going to have circumstances where you might actually create legal challenges to what you've decided to do, but you've got to rise above that. You've got to take your lumps and you've got to make the changes to make sure that, number one, you are responsible, that the program is sustainable, that diversity does count, and that you ensure that that people, communities that have been historically disadvantaged, that they have a shot at this industry or getting in the industry. But you can't be afraid to move forward. You're going where only 30 some odd other states have gone from a medical standpoint, and we're just around 20 states that are doing this on an adult use basis. So yeah, it's not perfect. Public policy is not perfect, but you can progress with it. And so that's what I encourage leadership at the state level and at the municipal level, at the policy level to contemplate. You can't say no to it just because you're afraid of it. You can't say no to it just because you haven't done it before. The whole point of policy, the whole point, and you can tell public policy is my first love. You don't ignore the opportunity of creating policy because you've got to right the wrongs of the past. You've got to create opportunities for the future. And so public policy does that. And so what I do encourage is as you do see lawsuits, I mean, Illinois, where they had to scrap the program and start all over again. You see the challenges in other states. It's okay because it's going to happen. It is growing pains, right? No pun intended. It is growing pains. And so what you have to do is actually say that we're going to do this, and we're going to do it with a deliberate focus on doing it right, doing it the right way, and doing it for the right reasons.